Thairo Estrada goes unclaimed on waivers, and the Giants outright him to Triple-A. So he is in the minor leagues, and surprisingly, not Marco Luciano, who gets called up in his place.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, been hosting this show for 5.5 years, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. And coming up on today's show, I do want to get out of the way that I apologize for not having an episode yesterday. We were waiting on news of the results of Thairo Estrada and Taylor Rogers and Tyler Matzek being placed on irrevocable waivers, and those results didn't come in, and then I had another obligation, and then it took all day, and this, that, and the other. So anyway, we got the news, and we're doing this episode on Saturday. But yeah, so Thairo Estrada and Tyler Matzek went unclaimed. The Giants announced that they've assigned Estrada outright to Triple-A Sacramento, and they also placed Tyler Matzek on unconditional release waivers, and Estrada, by clearing waivers here and being outrighted, comes off the 40-man roster. So the 40-man roster sits at 38 now, with the release of Matzek and with Estrada being outrighted. And so what does it mean to be outrighted? Well, a player can be outrighted once in their career, and so they have to clear waivers, and then basically the Giants, any team, if that player has never been outrighted before, let's see, the second has between 3 and 5 years of service. That gives him the right to decline an outright assignment, but require him to forfeit the remainder of his salary. So I guess if you have over 3 years of service, you can decline an outright assignment. And so if you have less than 3 years, if you've never been outrighted before, it just means that the team can send you to the minors even if you don't have any options remaining. So they didn't. This is a whole different situation than optioning a player, but he wouldn't want to forfeit the remainder of his salary. And so, he's just going to go to Triple-A, and he could spend the remainder of the season there. And this move that the Giants placed him on waivers in the first place, as I discussed yesterday, indicates that the Giants do not plan to tender him a contract when that deadline comes up shortly after the World Series ends. And so, it's a fall from grace for Estrada, who was one of the Giants' better players for the last few years, and then he ends up, getting sent to the minors here, clearing waivers. No team wanted to pick up the $810,000 that he was owed for the remainder of the season. Huge kind of chase issues, chasing 40% of the time. We looked up, he's got the lowest or second lowest on base percentage in baseball this year, lowest walk rate in baseball this year. So just too much chasing has basically been his issue. Really good defender. I'm surprised that nobody picked him up for the 1 month commitment at $800,000, but it is what it is, and the results are what they are there. So from the Giants' perspective, he goes to Triple-A, and he, when he was having his last at bat in Milwaukee, I was sitting there thinking this could be the very last at bat that we see of Thairo Estrada in a Giants uniform. So prior to this year, he was, he hit 266 with a 320 on base and 416 slugging for the Giants. He hit 35 home runs, stole 45 bases in 312 games, and was a really good defender and base runner. And so that's a valuable player. And he's only 28 years old, turns 29 in late February. So it's not like this is an old player. So I'm mostly surprised that no contender picked him up. There's not a single playoff contender that could use, potentially an upgrade at second base. I guess not. Or they just really don't view him as an upgrade. So, he'll play out the remainder. Probably, he has the right to reject this outright assignment, but I doubt that he would, because otherwise he'd forfeit that $800,000+ that he's going to make for just a month playing in Sacramento. And then the Giants will probably, when the deadline comes, non-tender him, which would make him a free agent. And then he could sign with any team. And the point being that he's gonna be, due for a raise from his $4.7 million salary this year to something in the neighborhood of $6.5 million ish next year. And so the point is that the Giants don't view him seemingly as a player worth giving a contract to that will cost them roughly $6.5 million next year. And he'll be a free agent and probably make less than that on the free agent market, but I would imagine somebody picks him up. I wish nothing but the best for this guy. And Bob Melvin did speak on the outright assignment for Estrada after it was announced that he had been outrighted. Melvin said he had a tough road this year with his hand and wrist and didn't perform the way he has in the past since we brought him back from the injured list. I think it's more now about trying to get some guys some opportunities and the fact that maybe the performance wasn't there. It's tough not to love Thairo. He's a great guy. He plays hard every day. He never makes excuses. He's been a great Giant. Unfortunately, this is the decision that we made. And so the other part of this, there's two other things to really say, is that who they called up in his place, I expected to be Marco Luciano, without really looking into how Luciano has been performing in Triple-A. But instead, the Giants went a different direction. And so coming up in just a minute, we'll get into the direction the Giants went instead. Who did they call up that wasn't Marco Luciano? And then also, what about Taylor Rogers? He was also placed on irrevocable waivers, and the Giants did not make an announcement about him. So what's going on there? We'll get into all of that. And yesterday's game, Matt Chapman with a big hit, free agent power rankings, much more to come in just a minute. And before we get into it, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by Liquid IV. For me, generally speaking, I've been a boring beverage guy. Water, coffee. And so for a cold drink, water gets a little boring. Enter Liquid IV into my life recently, and I can't get enough. I've got a couple packets right here in front of me that just looking at them makes my mouth water. And I've got a glass of it here, and you can see if you're watching on YouTube, I've already had half of it, and I'm going to have some more right now. It really is absolutely delicious, and it's my go-to drink now when I'm watching a game or when I'm thirsty and I just want to get less boring than drinking water, and it's just absolutely delicious. And so I would just encourage you to try it. The flavors that I've tried are these two that I showed you, popsicle, firecracker, and then also watermelon, which makes my mouth water drinking it and even talking about it. So tear, pour, live more. One stick plus 16 ounces of water. Hydrates better than water alone. 3 times the electrolytes of leading sports drinks. 8 essential vitamins and nutrients. Always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. All right, here we go. We are going to get into the fact that they didn't call up Marco Luciano. Who did they call up? And then also what's going on with Taylor Rogers, who we also learned was placed on waivers. But the Giants, announced the outcome for Matzek and Estrada, but they didn't announce anything about Rogers. So what the heck is going on? Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, on Monday, we will be breaking down, possibly, if we don't hear by the end of this episode, the outcome of the results of the Taylor Rogers being placed on waivers situation, and also the Giants and their 3-game series against the Marlins. They were able to squeak one out in game 1, but they're still in a very grim playoff position. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, the Giants, instead of calling up Marco Luciano, which is kind of what I assumed, again, without really even looking at his Triple-A numbers, they called up Brett Wisely, who we've seen a lot of over the last, this season. I mean, we've seen a lot of Brett Wisely this season, and he started off well, but overall fell off and is hitting on the season just .249 with a .285 on base and .363 slugging. So he really did start off well, but then these overall numbers are about 20% below average, and he's provided good defense. So that's one thing he's got going for him. And Casey Schmidt is also on this roster, and so that's going to give him an opportunity as well to play some second base. Brett Wisely against right-handed pitching. It's not like he's done great against right-handed pitching in his major league career. He's actually done better against left-handed. He's done a lot better against left-handed pitching, actually, but he's got a .500 batting average on balls in play in limited plate appearances against lefties. So it is worth mentioning that, Brett Wisely, yes, he's older, but his AAA performance, and that it matters a lot that he's 25 and Marco Luciano is 22. But, Wisely's done well in AAA last year and this year, really well. And so, prospect rankings, teams don't always have the same internal rankings that, external publications do. So when I look at Marco Luciano, I really love that he's walked 17% of the time in AAA. That's awesome. But Brett Wisely's walked 13% of the time, struck out just 15% of the time compared to 27% for Luciano. And Luciano was about 4% below league average in AAA this year, and last year in just 18 games was about 23% below league average, whereas Wisely's been about 20% above league average in AAA each of the last 2 years. And so, look, it's just somewhat apparent that there's not necessarily a ton of belief in the ability of Marco Luciano right now to perform at the major league level. They have their evaluation tools, and they've been wrong at times, but they've also called up some guys who just weren't expected to make an impact, and they have, Tyler Fitzgerald. It's not a total coincidence that he was selected to be on this roster and that he's broken through the way he has. And when Patrick Bailey got called up, it was a surprise to people, but then he just performed right away, particularly with the glove. So anyway, but the thing is, we've seen a lot of Wisely, so maybe this has a lot to do with Schmidt as well, and just giving him, because Schmidt and Luciano both right-handed. So I understand just wanting to give Casey Schmidt some looks as well. He's 25 years old, and at this point, it's kind of time to see what he can do at the major league level on a more consistent basis. So anyway, those are a couple of factors, and the fact that the Giants' 40-man roster is only at 38 is interesting, because that means they can add a couple players to the 40-man roster here moving forward. And I don't know if they, maybe are just preparing for offseason moves already, or if they intend to add a couple guys. I mean, they've got Cavan Biggio, who they signed to a minor league deal, not on the 40-man, in Triple-A. This guy's been a major league player, like kind of an opposite of Thairo Estrada, very, very selective to the point of passivity at times. He's hitting 182 in Triple-A, and yet he's been about 30% above average there. 182 batting average, about 30% above average. Why? Because he's walked 36% of the time. More than every 3 trips to the plate, Cavan Biggio has walked in Triple-A. And so he's a guy they could add to the 40-man and get a look at. He is going to be a free agent after this season. So, I don't know exactly what the long-term plan is here for Cavan Biggio, but, Donovan Walton, I don't know exactly who's performing well. We've got Hunter Bishop, someone I almost forgot about. He is in Triple-A, and the performance hasn't been good, so probably not going to see him. Donovan Walton, who, took a lot of heat. He's been roughly league average in Triple-A. But, yeah, I mean, Wade Meckler, but he's already on the 40-man. I'm just trying to think of guys who are not on the 40-man who we could possibly see added. Carson Whisenhunt, there is a name to look out for. Maybe of all the names I've mentioned here, maybe he's the most likely to get a look in the last month of the season. He was on the injured list for a while, but now he's made 2 starts, or actually, no, 4 starts. He started on the 13th, on the 18th, the 24th, and the 29th. So he's back and he's healthy, and in those 4 appearances, he's got a 2.84 ERA in 12 2/3 innings, 5 walks, 16 strikeouts. So yeah, Whisenhunt. I kind of was off Twitter yesterday. They're showing Mason Black as the probable starter today, which he's not currently on the roster. So that must have been. I mean, I'm not going to say must have been, but yeah, I mean, he's the projected starter. Maybe they're just guessing, like on roster resource and stuff, but it's on sfgiants.com as well. I was not on the grid yesterday, so I suppose Mason Black is starting tonight. That's so I seem to hear here, but he's not on the active roster, but he is on the 40-man, so that wouldn't be a 40-man move. But definitely we could see Carson Whisenhunt added to the 40-man. In terms of other players, I'm not entirely sure who would get added as I look through all the possible names. I mean, one guy, Bryce Eldridge, I don't think he's an actual candidate to just go from high A to the major leagues at the age of 19, but he is just killing it in high A. Like, he's been about 80% above average there, hitting 331, 436 on base, 599 slugging. So, no, the chances of him just going straight to the majors are not very good. But at the same time, I mean, could he be promoted to Double-A? For sure. And this was their first round draft pick last year, 16th overall. And it's just worth mentioning that he's just absolutely killing it so far as a teenager in, leagues where he's got to be one of the youngest players. In high A at age 19, I don't know exactly what the average age is there, but I just have been wanting to talk about him for a while. So anyway, coming up in just a minute, we will get into Taylor Rogers, placed on waivers, but we haven't heard anything. Also, Matt Chapman getting a huge hit last night, Blake Snell performing well. And speaking of Chapman and Snell, who are the top free agents going into the offseason? Well, MLB Trade Rumors put together a little list, and we'll just quickly go through it and talk about where Snell and Chapman rank. Since they have opt-outs, they are being listed among those as, potential free agents. So we'll get into all of that in just a minute. And before we do, this episode of Locked on Giants is brought to you in part by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members, myself very much included. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. So the last time I discussed my picks on Prize Picks, which you can see here on YouTube, I took more than 1.5 hits plus runs plus RBIs for Elliot Ramos against the Brewers. He got 2, so that hit. And then more than 1.5 total bases for William Contreras. He got 5, unfortunately, for the Giants, and that hit. So that was a $37.50 power play to win 150, and that was a winner. So today I've got more than half a walk for Grant McRae and more than 4.5 strikeouts for the Marlins pitcher Edward Cabrera. Anyway, download the Prize Picks app today and use code all lowercase LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, here we go. We're going to get into Taylor Rogers, Matt Chapman, and Blake Snell performing yesterday in the big win for the Giants. I say big, but probably didn't even matter. But it was still exciting. And then the top free agents and where those guys rank. Thanks again for making Locked on Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, on Monday, we will be probably discussing what ended up happening with Taylor Rogers, also breaking down the rest of this series, and potential ads. Actually, for sure, rosters expand in September, which starts tomorrow on Sunday. You get 2 extra roster spots. Your active roster goes from 26 to 28. And they have this potential to add 2 players to the 40-man. So expect some movement on the roster front in the next day, and we'll be breaking it down on Monday. So for Taylor Rogers, the speculation on MLB Trade Rumors when they wrote about Estrada and Matzek being released and Estrada being outrighted, was that they say, quote, "It's possible that the Giants didn't officially place Rogers on waivers until a day later than the Estrada and Matzek moves and are therefore still waiting on a resolution. However, it seems likely that Rogers went unclaimed and the Giants simply elected to hold on to him." So they wouldn't have to announce anything if he went unclaimed, and they didn't, because they didn't announce that they placed these players on waivers. They simply, it was reported by Grant Brisbee and Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic, so they don't have to announce when a player goes unclaimed. As I said about Taylor Rogers yesterday, if he goes unclaimed, they will just keep him because they're paying him regardless, and if they released him or something, they would owe him the money that they owe him next year, and it's not like he's bad. Maybe they'd like to get rid of the contract, but at the same time, they're not going to just give it up for nothing. And so, if he went unclaimed, then there wouldn't necessarily be an announcement. In fact, I wouldn't expect one. What would they even say? They could just say Taylor Rogers cleared waivers and is still on the Giants, but I don't think there would be any reason to do that. So I agree that, in fact, it is likely that that's what happened, is this just that he cleared and he's still here, and their attempt at hoping someone would take him on for the rest of the season, kind of with the caveat that that team would owe him the $12 million he's owed next year, didn't materialize, but we're not sure yet. If we don't hear anything by the end of today, then that would be the case for sure, because the claims process is like just a couple days, and so we would expect a resolution by the end of today. At the same time, it's just worth pointing out he's having a really good season, and yet I just think they need to kind of use him more and in higher leverage situations. 2.45 ERA, 3.16 expected ERA. So having him back next year is not the worst thing, but I'd like to see him kind of over like Eric Miller in higher leverage situations, like we saw against the White Sox when they went Miller and Bivens in a critical ninth inning scenario with their season on the line. Anyway, moving along, just worth pointing out the outing that Blake Snell had, another great one for him after he had a pretty rough one the start before. So his season ERA now is down to 3.56 with an expected ERA of 2.73, a fielding independent pitching of 2.75. This is all in just 86 innings because of the 2 months that he missed on the injured list. But yeah, since he came back from his latest stint on the injured list, that was on July 9th, he's got a 1.30 ERA. Strikeouts per 9, which is not what I like to look at, but that's all they're showing me here. About 12, 183 batting average on balls in play. Like, nobody's hitting this guy. And I mean, just 1.30 ERA over 62 and 2/3 innings. Yeah, that's like what he did last year too on his way to the Cy Young. Basically 20 starts of that kind of performance after 10 rough ones to start his season. And then, of course, Matt Chapman, Giants losing 1-0, bases loaded, 2 outs, 2 strikes, bottom 8. Huge hit, just a double in the left center field gap. And boy, did the Giants need that. Getting shut out by the worst team in the National League up to that point brings Chapman up to 4.2 Fangraphs wins above replacement on the season, hitting 246, 332 on base, 443 slugging. All 3 of those numbers above Major League average. Comes out to about 17% above Major League average overall offense for Chapman, plus defensive metrics like Chapman quite a bit. My eyeballs like Matt Chapman quite a bit, even though he's been a little bit error prone at times. Defensive runs saved at 13, which is very good. He's got 105 in his Major League career, which is exceptional. Outs above average at just 5, so that's a StatCast metric. He was at 4 last year, but in like 2021, 17 with Oakland. In 2019, 15 with Oakland. And so possibly some decline. Defensive runs saved had him at plus 23 and plus 28 in 2018 and 19. So, defense does decline as you age, and he is going to be 32 at the beginning of next season. So with that in mind, looking at the MLB Trade Rumors free agent power rankings, which they put out yesterday, it's the late August edition. Obviously, Juan Soto is number 1. They haven't yet put out contract predictions per se, although they did kind of put one in here. There's kind of estimates here actually as to what these guys may be seeking. They're talking $600 million with opt-outs possibly for Soto. In their speculation here. He's only 26 years old. Corbin Burns comes in at number 2. I don't know. He's kind of stopped getting swings and misses. I'm a little bit nervous there. They're saying you'll just have to read the piece. I think they're trying to say the asking price will likely be north of $200 million. Number 3 is Alex Bregman. Bregman, though, has... he started off poorly, but I think he's had a really nice turnaround and is having a typical Alex Bregman season. Thing is, his power is really dependent on pulling the ball just down the line, so that's a perfect ballpark for him in Houston. And they're saying that he could get close to $200 million. Number 4, Willy Adames. I think this is a really good fit for the Giants, especially with Thairo Estrada seemingly not in the plans moving forward, because then you've got Fitzgerald, but you could shift him over to second base, or really Fitzgerald could play the outfield, but the outfield's kind of crowded. And for Adames, they're kind of talking about $150 million range. I think that's a nice fit for the Giants. And then Blake Snell comes in at number 5, and saying he could take an aim at a deal in the $150 to $200 million range. For a pitcher entering his age 32 season, he turns 32 in December. Man, that's it. We're talking probably 6 years, 5-6 years, age 32 and beyond. Oof, I don't see the Giants doing that. So he's probably not coming back. And then Chapman comes in next at number 6, and they're saying, a deal that exceeds $100 million on like a 5-year deal is their estimate, which makes a lot of sense. And I definitely could see the Giants doing that, but it is worth pointing out, you're talking about age 32, 33, 34, 35, 36 on a 5-year deal. And is that really something you want to lock yourself down with? Maybe because of the stability that he brings, but maybe not because of decline that you have to consider. Max Fried, pitcher for the Braves, comes in at number 7. Jack Flaherty, pitcher for the Dodgers, currently comes in at number 8. Pete Alonso comes in at number 9. And the estimate here, they look at Freddie Freeman's deal, 6 years, $162 million. Paul Goldschmidt's deal, 5 years, $130 million. Of course, there's been some inflation since those deals were signed. So he could make sense for the Giants. Anthony Santander of the Orioles comes in at number 10. He's going to hit like 40 homers this year, which is crazy. And there's honorable mentions, including Ha-Sung Kim, who I think is a really good fit for the Giants, and Christian Walker, who could be a nice kind of fallback option, not Pete Alonso. Just as good, maybe not just as good, better defensively, but worse offensively, but still good offensively, but older, so you wouldn't have to commit quite the duration. So anyway, wanted to just point out that Snell and Chapman very high on the top 10 free agents list. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers on Monday, probably breaking down roster moves because rosters expand. 2 open 40-man spots. Mason Black, I haven't even seen that move announced or anything, but we'll have it all for you on Monday. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much. So thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again on Monday. Have a great weekend. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.